So hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar. It's just gone 1 o'clock, so I'm just going to give everyone a chance to join. Do feel free to drop into the Q&A box and say hi. We've disabled the chat feature as we've discovered it can cause problems for some people using screen readers. So I'll just give a few more moments for a few more people to join. You can see the numbers going up now. Okay, so hello and welcome to the 4th session in our Accessibility Insight series, where AbilityNet's Head of Inclusion, Bryn Christopherson, hosts a monthly online chat with individuals who are each working to improve digital accessibility and digital inclusion. And this month he's chatting to Bryn Anderson, who is an accessibility specialist at Sainsbury's. I'm Annie Mannion, I'm Digital Communications Manager at AbilityNet, and I'll be running you through today's session. So just to go through a few bits of housekeeping, we've got live captions on the webinar provided by Heather at MyClearText, so thank you, Heather. You can turn them on using the closed caption option on the control panel. There are also additional live captions via streamtext.net. And we do have slides available at slideshare.net/AbilityNet. And they're also on our website, abilitynet.org.uk/insights-Sainsbury's. And if you have any technical issues and you need to leave early, don't worry, you'll receive an email with the recording, transcript and slides in the next few days. And depending on how you joined the webinar, you'll find a Q&A window. So if you'd like to ask Bryn or Robin any questions, do drop those in the Q&A area for them to address, which they will do after today's session in a follow-up blog on our website. And then finally, we also have a feedback page you'll be directed to at the end, which invites you to tell us about any future topics you'd like to cover in our webinars. So please do let us know about that. So now over to Robin and Bryn.
Brilliant, thank you, Annie. So hopefully people can see us on the screen. I myself am completely blind, so I'm just taking it on faith that we're now on the screen myself. And Bryn, thank you very much indeed for agreeing to be subjected to questions for the next 30 minutes. So yeah, to introduce Bryn Anderson, he was formerly of Site Improve, which is a very sophisticated automated accessibility checking solution, and he's now with Sainsbury's. And you are an accessibility specialist at Sainsbury's. So first question then, what is your beverage of choice to help you get through this ordeal? I've got a cup of tea here.
Cup of tea. The beverage is already gone, and it was a coffee.
Are you fortified?
Yeah, and I sort of I was a bit in two minds about it because haven't always been a coffee drinker, so I don't really. I'm a bit unpredictable with how I handle the caffeine. So
oh dear.
And it's sort of a weird habit of like before. If I get excited, I was getting excited about doing this today, and then in my excitement, I thought I'd add some fuel to the excitement fire by having a coffee just before.
This could go either way.
Yeah, who knows? Yeah, but yeah, exactly. Yeah, so coffee, but it's gone.
Well, okay, good. Well, I hope you are sufficiently fortified. So first question then. So you were at Site Improve, as I mentioned, and that was a relatively small organization, completely focused on accessibility. And then you go to this enormous, national household name, high street name, Sainsbury's. So how different was that? Was the business case or the argument for accessibility already won when you came, or is it like an ongoing thing where there are, competing priorities in such a massive organization?
So it's an interesting one. I think certainly it's a huge organization. I didn't comprehend the size of it. And of course, then the sort of the pace, the speed that things move is also quite different. some things move really quickly at Sainsbury's, like when we saw with the whole Feed the Nation piece. It was a real, real sort of whirlwind where we were releasing things in quicker than we normally do, just as an example. But I think, there's a lot of stuff that moves really slowly, and so like change management, which is often associated with bringing or introducing an accessibility agenda to a business. However, it was definitely already a big priority before I got there. We have so Sainsbury's, the business that also has Argos 2, Habitat, and Nectar, has the slogan that it wants to be the most inclusive retailer where people love to work and shop. And that's a sort of top down, there's a sponsor, a director level sponsor, Tim Fallowfield, who's sort of driving that initiative in various ways. So it and Site Improve, because it sold an accessibility tool, obviously had to sort of walk the walk. But I think Site Improve being a smaller business, it's much easier to do that with a a single website that it replicates for its regions around the world. I mean, it's still no feat for sure, and there were still issues, of course, but doing that on the scale that is Sainsbury's and all of its brands is a huge challenge. Even if you have got a top-down initiative, right?
So they were already bought in to accessibility. I mean, we were being fortunate enough to work with Sainsbury's over the years, but it's just like on such a huge scale.
Yeah, it is, and I think the size of the departments and the collaboration and who drives what, and just understanding how a business like that operates can really take some time, to really understand who the influencers are and how and how things work, so so I think it's a, whereas Site Improve is a bit more like, right, we want to do this, let's make it happen now. Sainsbury's, like, it's a bit of a longer game, but there are some fantastic initiatives already at the business to kind of drive awareness, and you talked about the sort of competing agenda items, and there are competing agenda items. For example, this month we're celebrating Black History Month, Sainsbury's, and we have lots of people coming to talk with us, Trevor McDonald and things like that. So they get all the, there's loads and loads and loads of kind of educational opportunities, and accessibility is one of many, which is a good and bad thing, right? Because we don't want it to be something you need to learn about. It should just be built in to everything. We should all just know about it. But unfortunately, society is not quite there yet.
But it's definitely not kind of at the bottom of the diversity.
Absolutely not. No, yeah. I can't think of all of the diversity, inclusion and diversity kind of. Well, I can't think what to call them now. Strands or tracks, but disability is one of those, and it's certainly not just a digital initiative. It's very much extends to our stores and physical environments and things like that. Yeah.
Brilliant. Now, you mentioned earlier there that it's an inclusive place to work and shop. So that implies, that covers the employees and your customers as well. So because it's such a massive organization and there's so many strands to it, how easy is it to keep on top of that? I mean, is Sainsbury's a truly inclusive place across all its, customer channels and internal applications that employees have to use, and that, maybe new applications have been thrust upon them with COVID?
Yeah. Well, I think it would be really naive to suggest that, well, it would be wrong to suggest that we are, truly inclusive retailer. But I think that inclusion, being inclusive, if inclusion means 100% inclusive to everyone at all times, then I don't think anyone is that, and that's not making an excuse.
Of any size.
Yeah, exactly. So, but I think the in terms of like both our colleague facing applications and customer facing applications, and checkout tills and all that stuff. No, I don't think everything is inclusive, and there's things that we know about and there's things that we don't know about. And I think I don't want to get too sort of existential and upside down, but I was thinking about this beforehand, and just I think like inclusion, it's a funny thing, isn't it? It's almost like a contradiction, or there are so many contradictions within the idea of inclusion, and in practice it's specialist knowledge. So it's kind of like exclusive knowledge. You need, in order to be inclusive, you need to be exclusive first to understand what it means, and then somehow through some education, then everyone will all of a sudden kind of get it, and it will just be included in everything they do. And it isn't. It's just, I mean, if you think about all of the different departments and teams within them going out and buying maybe third-party solutions for things, or just executing on their roadmaps. We do not have, with the 100, 200 different product teams across the business, we don't have an accessibility specialist embedded in each one of those teams, and I think I don't know of an organization that would have that approach. So there's willingness, there's a lot of people who are open to it and they want to learn more, and they come to me for support with things, but on the ground, like until it is a mainstream part of education in general, and it's not a taboo in society, there'll always be a leaky bucket for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it is a work in progress, isn't it?
Yeah,
It
yeah.
really is. And as systems change, as circumstances change, as senior management change, or whatever,
Yeah.
it's definitely something that it's not a destination that you'll ever get to. But I mean, I mentioned earlier, we have been working with Sainsbury's. We know that Sainsbury's have prioritized accessibility or digital inclusion over the years.
Yeah.
So certainly compared to some other supermarkets, for example. Have you kind of got the impression, or have hard evidence, that level of inclusion that you achieved pre-COVID, stood you in good stead to deliver services, this massive spike in online shopping, etc., to your customers? Were you well prepared?
Well, it's a really big question. I think if we take the business as a whole, we were well prepared in that a lot of people understand what inclusion and accessibility is. Our drivers, pre-COVID would make exceptions for people helping them carry their shopping, on the delivery front. And like you mentioned, we've had an accessibility agenda for some time. So I was reporting on iOS stats, in the build up to COVID, about font scaling, right? So how many out of all the sessions, what is the percentage of sessions that are being completed with a larger font setting? And it was 30% of all of our iOS sessions. Wow. Which is huge, right? So there's that sort of knowledge already there. So we knew that, actually, I beg your pardon, it was around 27, it went up to 30 from March, April, May, which is also very interesting, right? But I think, so there was all this, there is knowledge and there's understanding there, but then my knowledge is different from, the next guy's knowledge and her knowledge and his knowledge. So having a concise message and all agreeing on, the language of accessibility and what we should say and when we should say it, that wasn't really there. That structure, I don't think was there, and I think I'm talking really about the nuances within this subject matter. And I think a really good example of that is like disability. What is a disability? How do you define disability? How do you identify people who identify themselves as having a disability, and so on? it's a really fraught area.
I mean, we've almost
in
been
that
asked
sense.
to put ourselves into buckets. You know, I am
Yeah.
vulnerable.
Oh,
I have to
I'm
isolate.
sufficiently disabled. Yeah. And a lot of people, more people have come forward. I'm visually impaired, and I, you know, born with albinism, and never, certainly didn't identify as someone who was disabled. And I think that's a lot down to my parents, right? Despite being treated differently and so on by other kids in schools and institutions, blah, blah, blah. But I find myself, you know, identifying with that more and more, because it actually, during that, especially during this sort of pandemic, it actually really carried some weight, you know, and the topic, accessibility, disability, you know, it was really mainstream. You know, we're on tech huddles and digital huddles, 600 people or whatever, you know, on these calls, and you know, accessibility, disability is like right up there, top of the agenda. So it was an incredible thing in that respect. But it doesn't mean that people understand it, right? Do you know what I mean? Like, it just because it's being talked about, it doesn't mean that everyone understands it.
It's not like a check, you know, a little 10-point
No,
checklist
it's not. And even
with.
absolutely, I mean, even just the different models of disability, right? Of, you know, medical versus social and so on, you know, how people talk about it. It sort of, I feel like there's a debate around every corner. There's a potential sort of lesson and a debate, right?
So I mean, it's an ongoing journey, and you know, the challenge for everyone within organizations for whom, you know, they're an accessibility champion or, you know, passionate about it, to maintain that level of prioritization and resources, and COVID's definitely helped. You know, the demographic, as you mentioned, has shifted towards online. They have, you know, less proportionately less digital skills, they need more support, that sort of thing. So what do you see as kind of being a really good, or being the, you know, strands of the solution going forward to make sure that organizations continue to prioritize? You know, is it giving the law more teeth? Is it carrying on kind of winning the business case, you know, mobile equals extreme computing, so actually this is going to help every user? More AI, better use of automated checking tools.
Yeah, I mean, a really good one. I don't know how long we've got, but I'll try and sum up there. But summing up. Basically, I think okay, the legal thing, you know, hard to say that wouldn't have an impact on raising awareness and you know, people trying to do something about it, but I'm not sure that it encourages the right type of behavior. It's definitely encouraging a compliance checkbox approach, but still, you know, I definitely wouldn't cast it aside. The AI is a big question mark about that, so maybe we can come back to that one. I have some thoughts about that, but ultimately, you know, it's only as good as the people who program it, right? So, you know, I think that, or at least my limited understanding of machine learning and AI. So ideally, we wouldn't have to worry about educating people who come in, engineers who come into the business. An engineering role in the future would be different, and it wouldn't be about adding ARIA labels to things. It would be just, I don't know what it would be. They're testing or checking that things were working, as opposed to having to have all of this specialist knowledge, right? So maybe AI can help there.
The AI is doing its job.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, somehow. Yeah, I don't know. Making sure that yeah, exactly. God knows. It's a very futuristic image I have in the sort of control room. But the other piece, I think the biggest piece, and I think companies like Sainsbury's have a massive opportunity here, like Microsoft as well, other large corporates, to really utilize the workforce to leverage, you know, their voice as people with disabilities. We know that we have a huge amount of our workforce. We have 190,000 employees, you know, and we know that a lot of them have impairments. So I think there's a lot of grassroots stuff. I think a lot really happens at that level. We have a network called the Enable Network It's sponsored by Tim Fallowfield and chaired by a lady called Beth Hartley, who is deaf, by the way. And that group is really about connecting colleagues across the business, and there's different departments. So we've got people in logistics now talking to designers in my team about colleague applications. And I think that we're enabling conversations with people, which is in turn education, gives people a voice, it raises awareness, and there's of course the most important thing, which is sort of this education piece. And I think you could probably relate to this, you know, like that you can talk about theoretically about someone with like a cognitive impairment or dyslexia or whatever, but it's when someone with dyslexia comes and says, when I try and do this on your application, it really doesn't work, then that's where the education happens. So I think leveraging, so within big organizations, leveraging the workforce, the voice of the workforce, and, you know, in society, really encouraging people to come forward and talk about being disabled and what that means, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, leveraging the diverse workforce to provide valuable input and to formalize that, you know, to have focus groups or to have some employees that are happy to have test versions sent out to them on a regular basis as part of their kind of,
absolutely,
not 20%, but, you know, where they have the flexibility to do things other than the day job, and to have lived experiences, as they call it, which is, you know, you and I having the disability to actually make it real.
Yeah,
Certainly
no,
when
but
we...
sorry, Robin, I think that absolutely, and it is all about that. But I think that the reason that can exist in a business is because you have a kind of policy initiative goal from the top down in the first place. I think it's very hard to kind of do that sort of almost sort of guerrilla style, you know, underground revolution, do you know what I mean, approach. So every time we have a meeting, every time we connect a colleague to a colleague, it's always under the banner of, well, after all, we want to be the most inclusive retailer where people love to work and shop. So you better turn up, you know. Do you know what I mean? Anyway, sorry, I interrupted you.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, that's where, you know, initiatives like the Valuable 500 that Caroline Casey is championing, you know, to make sure that there's C-level buy-in for disability, not to forget disability in the kind of festival of diversity. You know, it's kind of the one that's forgotten about over BAME and LGBTQ and all these different things, you know, but yeah, to keep it on people's agenda, to make sure that it's on the agenda of every board meeting, that sort of thing. Because if you don't have that buy-in at that level, then you can't get kind of the right messaging, the right resourcing of everyone, you know, the network of champions within organization, and ideally even everybody having at least awareness of the concepts of it. Yeah. So absolutely. AI then, so you used to work for Site Improve. There are other automated checking tools out there. They're a long way from being able to, for example, know what a piece of JavaScript does.
Yes.
So, you know, do you ever see the replacement of kind of manual auditing that AbilityNet does by kind of smart automated large scale checkers?
There were a few, there's a few interesting things. I think in terms of like executing JavaScript, I don't believe that is a problem, or hasn't been a problem for a couple of years. But you know, a kind of script, like testing a scripted flow, for example, we've done a bit of that using Cypress and DQ's Axe Core, which I believe Google Lighthouse and Microsoft Insights use. It's the engine there.
Yeah, so that's kind of making the testing, the kind of the scanning process more automated and clever.
Yeah, I suppose that. Yeah, exactly. Yes, but I mean, you can't. So I'll be announcing a dashboard that we've built in my team, the Lunar Guidelines team. So we build and maintain the design system, the Sainsbury's design system, which is called Lunar. And anyway, we've built this dashboard that monitors a few pages of each of our, you know, our sort of main customer-facing brands. And obviously, I will caveat that by saying, you know, automation's great for doing, you know, top of the funnel stuff, but it can't, well, not even, it's not necessarily top of the funnel. It can't do these types of things. It can't test if every task can be completed with the keyboard, for example. So I think we're a long way from that. And I think that if there are businesses out there that are claiming like compliance, like I've seen some JavaScript overlay businesses out there. I don't want to name names, but there are solutions out there that this sort of remediation solution where, oh, you know, we'll bring you 100% compliance. All you need to do is pay us $1,000 a month or whatever. I mean, completely limited solutions. They're band-aid solutions, and there's nothing clever about them. There's engineers behind them, you know, hard coding those fixes for that particular version. You release something, it will break, you know. So long way from that.
It really needs to come from the content creators, developers, rather than retrofitting, where the kind of onus, the responsibility is moved away from the people that are developing the solutions to those who can kind of scan it and tweak it and stuff, which, you know, that's not the ideal scenario.
No, there's too many cooks in the whole process, you know, and that's one of the biggest problems, is that, you know, not everyone has the same level of knowledge. Do you know what I mean? We can't, yet we're all equally responsible. I'm maybe not making it super clear, but I think going back, I was saying something about there's a lot of contradictions in this whole concept of wanting to be inclusive. And I just feel that it's a huge challenge and a huge education piece for all the parts of the ecosystem that, you know, accessibility touches. So ironically, it's kind of hard to be inclusive without a specialist at the moment, you know. So
I think until the solutions become really embedded in the day job of every individual, and that can kind of do a bit of hand holding to a certain extent. I mean, the accessibility checker in Office, I think, is a really good example. It's a shame it's not surfaced by default, but I think we'll get there with tools, we'll get there with training, and COVID has helped, I think, that you know, focus the mind and make organizations realize that digital needs to be inclusive, otherwise there will be problems. Great, so we're coming towards the end. Anything else we haven't covered before I ask for a comment about what to pass on to the next guest?
I would just like to give a shout out actually to Catherine Moonham, who was my predecessor, and
formerly
really
of AbilityNet.
Yeah, was she?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think she said something about all those audits that she'd done. Wasn't keen on going back to those.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, Catherine's been very inspirational for me, and she really helped me along with my sort of introduction to Sainsbury's and everything, and was part of an initiative that Sainsbury's ran last year, which was a text resize pledge to make sure to ensure that all of our products, our applications would scale and work on larger font settings. So it's a hugely challenging thing to achieve a business like that, of that size. And I think it's a real testament to her ability to I mean, there's a sort of politicking element, right?
Absolutely, you've got to win hearts and minds internally.
Yeah, totally. So
absolutely,
just want to give her a shout out for sure. Yeah,
she's a star, an absolute star. Speaking of which, so last month, Paul Smith of Barclays, speaking of stars,
legend,
so he had a comment to pass on, which was basically to say that it's super important for people that feel passionate about accessibility, about digital inclusion, and have a level of knowledge, expertise to kind of go out there into the community, you know, to network, to join the specialist groups that are out there. I'm thinking IAAP, for example, but there will be local ones as well, and to kind of share the wealth, basically, so that can kind of have a groundswell of awareness and knowledge in this area. So anything to comment on that, and anything you want to pass on to our next guest, that's Chris Patno. He's head of accessibility at Google.
Yeah, serious chap. Yeah.
Funny guy, actually.
Yeah, I don't know. I
Seriously.
haven't met him. I'd love to meet him though. Yeah, very cool. I should be tuning in for that one for sure. I think in regards to Paul, I think yeah, absolutely. You know, like there is a you know, some kind of responsibility, and you know, for people with knowledge to share it. Definitely, that I kind of feel that should be a given. But I think there's also an onus on people that have disabilities to come forward about them. And I know that that is also a bit fraught and challenging. There's a lot of shame around, you know, disability and so on. And, you know, people just don't even know, you know, we've got colleagues talking about getting their diagnosis in their late 20s, 30s for autism and things like that. So I feel that the real, that's where the magic happens, when you get the masses talking about. I mean, if we let's put the 20% to the test. You know, if it's really 20%, I mean, that is a massive minority of people, right? If we're talking about a population which essentially a business like Sainsbury's serves. So,
and if you add mental health on top of that, which
yeah,
or you know, people are more willing to come forward on that as well. So yeah.
So I think that it, yes, of course, me and you should be talking about it in more in sort of other contexts. But I really, if there's some way to encourage people who just struggle to come forward and say, yes, I have this type of problem, count me in. Then you know, and yeah, for your next guest, I think everyone. A lot of people know the term AI, and definitely know that Google are doing a lot of stuff in it, but I don't think they really know what, right? And there's a cool, oh no, I'm not going to get into that. I was going to talk about the social dilemma, but I think that's a little bit harsh to bring that up. So I won't bring that up. But it's a very interesting film if you're curious about media giants, tech giants, and the future and all of that. But anyway, I think, so AI is often sold as this sort of silver bullet. It's going to solve everything. I know that was my hope for it as an accessibility specialist. Engineers wouldn't have to build anymore. They could just, you know, demand an interface and it would come served up on a platter, you know, bells and whistles, fully accessible. I know that's not the case. And I think it would be nice to talk a little bit about that. What are the pitfalls of AI for accessibility, and what, you know, and considering those pitfalls, what are the benefits and how do those things kind of balance out? I think it would be really nice to hear his thoughts on that.
What a brilliant question. That's really good. Thank you very much. We're out of time. Hope everybody's found this as interesting as I have. Thank you so much, Bryn.
Pleasure.
Really appreciate you coming on.
I really enjoyed it.
Guys, the transcript and the recording of this will be available after the fact, like Annie says. And with one final thanks to Bryn, I'm going to pass you back to Annie for a bit of housekeeping.
So thank you so much to Bryn and Robin, and there are lots of questions that we hope to answer online in the next few days, and you'll receive an email with the link to that page. So just a bit more information that might be of interest to you. We also run online training sessions on digital accessibility, and you can find out more about them at abilitynet.org.uk/training. You can use a 10% off discount code, which is available to registrants of this particular webinar, which is 10 Sainsbury's, 10 Sainsbury's. And then you can also, if you could move on to the next slide, please, Sarah. Thank you. You can also sign up to our e-newsletter for the latest announcements about digital accessibility, visit our YouTube channel, and don't download our podcast. And don't forget about our next webinars, which are available at abilitynet.org.uk/webinars. The next session is on the 20th of October, which is how to do accessible social media. And followed by the next Accessibility Insights chat on the 10th of November, when we're joined by Christopher Patno, who heads up the digital accessibility team at Google. So thank you, Bryn, Robin, and everyone that's joined us, and we'll be in touch with you soon. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, guys.